Welcome to the Unboxing Technology series by Digitarati. This video is on Azure Data Factory.
Azure Data Factory. So before we get into the discussion, first of all, we need to define what it is. So this Azure Data Factory, so is it there is obviously a word called data here, and there is another word called factory here. So is it a database service? If it is a database service, is it a relational database service, or it is a NoSQL database service, or is it a data warehousing kind of thing, or it is a data analytical tool, or are we going to do visualizations or analysis here, or are we going to store large volumes of data? Is it a big data tool? So obviously all these questions comes into picture. But whatever I have put forward, it is none of this. It's not a relational database, or it is not a NoSQL database, or it is not something which is related to warehousing, or it is not something uh, which process the information in large volumes, something like data lake. So it is none of this, but what it is something which integrates and collaborates all of this. So that is what Azure Data Factory is. To be very precise, as simple as that, Azure Data Factory means, or Azure Data Factory is basically an ETL system. So everybody must be aware of this term called ETL: extract, transform, load. Even in Excel, the Microsoft Excel which we use, even in Excel also we do have that feature called as extract, transform, and load. So for example, if someone has used extensively Excel, obviously we would have found an option, maybe from a web or from SQL Server or from MS SQL. You can extract the data. It's not that just extracting the data. While extracting the data, you can apply some filters on it, or you can apply some operations on it. Then after applying the filter, you will be loading the data into Excel. So in Excel feature, that ETL feature is very much limited to only one destination called as Excel sheet. You are loading the data at end of the day to Excel sheet, but the source might be multiple sources. It might be a web source, or it might be Excel sheet, another Excel sheet, or it might be MS Access, or it can be any database. So various sources. So from a source, extracting the data, transforming the data, and loading it finally into a destination is what ETL is all about. So there are many such tools like Talent, Informatica. There are some Oracle ETL tools, and various third-party tools are there. As far as other cloud services, there in AWS, we do have AWS Glue service, which performs similar kind of activity. So in Azure, the answer for ETL operations, right? So as I told, let us discuss in what scale it does it, and what things could be involved in it. That and all, as we move subsequently in the same session, we'll be discussing about it. But at this point of time, what I want to put forward is Azure Data Factory. So to give a very straightforward answer for what is this Azure Data Factory all about, it is basically an ETL system. As I have just put forward, I'll come back again here, but as I have just told, it's an ETL system. So what is the basic process or basic idea of ETL? So before we get into how Azure Data Factory answers the need of an ETL system, first of all, in general, let us discuss, or let us talk about ETL process in a generic yet simple fashion. Then we'll get into the topic under discussion called Azure Data Factory, how Azure Data Factory addresses this problem, in what scale it addresses the issue. That will go. But before that, first of all, we need to understand what are the primary properties or primary needs of an ETL system. So as you see in the screen already, any ETL system, first of all, it must be capable of extracting. The first step is it has to be capable, right? It has to be capable of extracting information from various sources. It can be a RDBMS system, or it can be a NoSQL system. It can be able to extract information from flat files like CSV, JSON, or XML, or even text format. As long as it is in semi-structured format, it must be able to analyze it and grab it. And by making REST API calls, it must be able to get it. Or it might be in the picture, it's maybe not mentioned, but it might be able to, it should be able to read logs, log files is also having certain format. Everybody knows that how a log file would be. We might be having the severity level of the log, we might be having time, which thread, what is the message. So as long as it has some structure, your ETL system must be able to extract it, right? So that should be the capability of any ETL system. And if you ask me whether Azure Data Factory does that, yes. So Azure Data Factory supports various connectors to get connected with various information sources. We'll talk about it. So the primary thing is an ETL system, first of all, should be able to communicate with as many sources as possible. I use the word again, as many, because in IT industry, there are many possibilities, right? So anything which is structured or semi-structured, any new component which is getting popular in the market, an ETL system should be able to connect. You take any ETL system in the market, almost all major ETL systems might be having a mechanism to connect as many popular data sources as possible. That should be the prime feature of any ETL system, right? So whether this Azure Data Factory is capable of it, yes, it is capable. Then in the picture in the middle, we have what? Before you load it into a warehouse, okay? A warehouse is nothing but ultimately, instead of calling it a warehouse, I can say it might be another source also, sorry, another destination also. It can be another RDBMS system, or if the volume is large and if it is generally dedicated for analysis, you can call it a warehouse. Generally in warehouse, we might not be making it for, it's not an online transaction system. It's an online analytical system. There is a difference between OLTP and OLAP. So a data warehouse is a OLAP system, whereas a RDBMS system is an OLTP system, online transaction processing, whereas a data warehouse would be usually an online analytical process. So we might not be looking at transactional level principles like ACID and all in data warehouse. It is meant to store information which is meant to be analyzed, as you see exactly in the picture. But the point is, any ETL system, before it extracts and finally loads into a destination, in our case, or in general, in most common case, it's going to be a warehouse. So if you ask me whether data factory is a warehouse, no. Definitely, as a continuation to data factory, you need to integrate with warehousing technologies or other analytical technologies, which we'll discuss as we proceed. But at this point of time, where is the job of Azure Data Factory REST? It does three things: extract, load it to another component, and Azure Data Factory is not this. Azure Data Factory is doing the job of extraction, and in the middle, it is doing some job called as transformation, that is converting things. So what exactly is transformation? Within next 5 minutes, I'll be talking the various transformation possibilities. So if at all transformation is not required, you can simply ignore the step, directly extract and load it to different format. In that case also, there must be some activity called as mapping. So here the source has to be mapped to the destination, that is source field and destination fields need to be mapped. So in the middle, if you need some intermediate processing, what are the intermediate processing that are usually possible? That has to be discussed. Of course, we will discuss. So as I put forward, Azure Data Factory is an ETL system, and in that ETL system, what it basically does is extract, transform, load. How does Azure Data Factory do that? That is what we are going to discuss. That is plain agenda of this particular 2 hours discussion. So if it has to extract, it must be having a capability to connect to multiple sources. Whether Azure Data Factory is providing that solution, that we have to discuss. How it is providing that solution, second, that is how you that is what you have to discuss, and practically how to do that. So are we going to discuss all 3 levels? Yes. So we are going to check what is that and how is it addressing, and whether we are going to practically check it. Yes. Then there is an operation called as transformation. So we need to discuss what kind of transformation are possible, whether Azure Data Factory has solutions offered for this transformations and integrations. Yes, Azure Data Factory has a comprehensive solution for this, and we are going to see how Azure Data Factory addresses this. And practically, are we going to see this? not at a deeper level, but because when I say the time span and all, I didn't complicate it. I'm just going to do the mapping operation, not nothing complex, but I'm going to show you what are the various options out there, then loading the data into a destination, right? So definitely we're going to see the practical implementation of these three steps, but we need to understand how Azure Data Factory addresses this solution. So as you see now in the picture, exactly this is where Azure Data Factory comes into picture. There must be various information sources. It's not always files, it can be any information source. First, they use the word called copy because in Azure Data Factory, the activity is called as copy activity. So they use the word copy, but here it is actually called extraction. So you are extracting by using Azure Data Factory. If you wish, you could transform, and then obviously you'll be loading, ETL, loading to another data source. Okay. So I told that in next 5 minutes or next 2 minutes we'll be discussing, because two things are very clear already. Because it's not complex to give a thought process. You know what is extraction? That is connecting to a data source. So first of all, obviously that ETL system has to provide a mechanism to configure the connection. If it is a file, you need to show where the file is. If it is an Excel sheet, you need to say in the Excel sheet which from which row the data is starting. If the first row is the header row or not, all this configuration you need to do. If it is an RDBMS system, you need to give the connection string and table name and all. If it is a NoSQL system, also you need to do the same thing. So if it is a log file, you need to give the format of the log file. So based on the information system, according to the information system with which you are connecting, you need to use an appropriate configuration. That is what extracting all about. Loading also same. You need to configure the destination. A destination can be an Excel sheet, or it can be a file, or it can be a database. Even in that case, you need to configure the destination. But in the middle, the challenging part or the very important part is, that doesn't mean that other parts are not important. Everything is equally important, but where we need to invest time, and where we need to do things very properly, because in other places processing is not involved. The place where you process the things is a transformation part. So generally in an ETL system, what are the basic transformations at least which we do is, number one, cleaning, right? So sometimes from a source, you might be extracting data. Before it reaches a destination, according to the destination, for example, in warehousing, in analysis, right? So when you want to use the data for analysis, they might be performing the query. The query might be performed based on this values, M and F, because it might help them to manage it quite easily. And similarly, the analysis tool might not be supporting null. So they want to treat it as 0, because sometimes they might be performing aggregation operations. So null might not give them appropriate results. So they want to substitute with 0. So before it reaches to the destination, according to the context, what you might do is, be it date, or be it a string, or be it a number, you might be doing some basic cleaning activity. So based on some conditions, you might be transforming the data. So one of the very common basic operation. And second, as I don't need to even explain it, deduplication. That is, if the source is giving duplicate data, maybe in the destination you might not want it. So after checking the incoming data, you might be filtering out the duplication, and you might be removing it. And third, character set, right? Or the format. It might be a data format, sorry, it might be currency format, it might be date format, or it might be character set which is used in the source, right? So whatever the source, destination essentially doesn't need to be using the same character set format. For example, sometimes you might be extracting data related to a particular language. Maybe the source data might be either in an Indian language like Hindi or Tamil or Telugu, and in the destination, it might be just a storage. You don't need to physically read the data, and you don't need to present it sometimes, right? So if that is the case, you might be even changing the character set, or in the source, the character set might not be essential. They might be using binary data, but in the destination, since you want to present it properly, you want to change the character set. So for all this business requirement, format revision and changing of character sets was a necessary transformation. So again, in a basic transformation, this is a very common operation. And For example, let us assume you are reading data from two Excel sheets. Two Excel sheets are independent bodies or independent units. But from two Excel sheets, if you are moving data to one table or two tables, maybe at a Excel sheet level, you might not have established relationship because it's not possible, because Excel sheet is just a sheet, it's a file. Whereas when it goes to the relational database, there has to be some relationship. So you must be able to match the fields, and you must be able to identify what would be the primary key, what would be the relationship, and how they are related. That level of transformation has to be added in the middle. So key restructuring is also very common basic transformation which we do. So what I'm trying to put forward here is, any ETL system, any implementation, you take anything, if you take a tool, definitely it should facilitate operations which lets you do this key transformation. And if you ask me whether Azure Data Factory is providing all this feature, the answer is obviously yes, right? And apart from that, this is basic thing, and definitely as a chain, the other advanced transformation which you could obviously would try to do is derivation. That is, a source value might be something. After applying some business rules, maybe based on the score, you might be generating rank. Based on the income, you might be calculating tax and other stuff, and you might be generating the net income, whatever. So according to the context of business scenario, you might be applying business logic on the raw data, and you might be transforming that data to generate new fields out of it. So there must be a possibility for deriving new values from the existing values. And a very, very common operation which we follow in which we find in any kind of ETL system is, source essentially doesn't need to contain, destination or sink doesn't need to contain the equal number of rows as that of the source. Based on your business logic, you'll always try to filter it. And similarly, you might be joining data as I have told from the Excel example, I might be having multiple Excel sheets. There must be a facility to join data from multiple sources. And similarly, if data, for example, I could say even log, right? So in a log, you might be getting the data as a single string. You must be in a position to split based on some format. What you should be able to do is, in a log, it is just a single record, right? But from that single record, you must be able to extract the time, you must be able to extract the thread name, you must be able to extract the actual message. After extracting it, maybe if you want to move it a table, you can send it to a multiple set of columns. So there must be a possibility for splitting, and there must be a possibility of validating whether the data is sticking to the business rules or not. Only the validated data you might be approving to move to the sink. So there must be validation capabilities. And from which is, if a data is coming from multiple data sources, you might not be the data essentially doesn't need to be always a tabular data itself. So you might get a tabular data, you might be applying a program or anything, you might be generating a PDF document out of it, which is generally might be summarizing the report. So even reporting can be part of it, right? So summarization is a basic transformation which we do. And as well as aggregation, there is a difference between joining and aggregation. Aggregation is nothing but getting data from multiple sources and performing average operations, as well as any standard deviation calculation or mean operations, whatever. You perform aggregate operations and move it to the data warehousing. So aggregating information from multiple sources need to be supported. So as I have just told, in an ETL system, all this basic transformation, even though I have used the word advanced, but you cannot avoid any of this operation when you build an ETL system. All of this has to be supported, and definitely Azure Data Factory is supporting all this transformation possibilities. Okay, so now, so as I have as brief as I can, I didn't talk multiple minutes or many minutes on ETL. So very quickly, what I have established is an ETL system. It must facilitate connecting with multiple sources as well as multiple destination, two things over. In the middle, it should facilitate transformation. And I told what basic things are involved in transformation. I listed out few of the very common transformation. And now let us discuss everything in the perspective of Azure Data Factory, right? As I have clearly mentioned, it is an ETL system, and as you see as the headline, it is a code free. That is, you don't, if at all you want to involve code, it is possible. I won't say 100% you can do everything without code. Yes, most of the use case scenarios without writing code, you can do it. If at all code is required, you can infuse that as well. So that is what I'm trying to say. So mostly it is a code free ETL, and it is, you are not charged for the infrastructure which they are offering, infrastructure in terms of this tool, where it is deployed, where the ETL is running, that and all you never know, right? So you'll not be charged for CPU, or you'll not be charged for the memory which the service is consuming. You'll never know, right? They offer ETL as a service. That is, you have to work on the ETL operations with Azure, not on your premise system. You'll be working in portal, or you might be programmatically interacting with ETL, Azure Data Factory. But the point is, it is ETL as a service, and the charging is completely based on services, ETL services which they are offering, definitely not for infrastructure. Okay. So what exactly, what key components or what key ideas or what key things involved in that ETL system is, as they have just mentioned, this 5 different units, or I would say 5 different things in the process. One is ingesting, that is infusing data or getting data from the source. In other words, extracting data from the source. So ingest data into the control flow and data flow, right? So data flow is different, control flow is different. I'll differentiate both the things. As you see here, this particular service called Azure Data Factory, as of now, just took this from Azure official site. As of now, it is supporting. It might always, it is bound to increase on a day-to-day basis, but as of now, it is supporting 90 plus connectors. That is, you can connect with Excel sheet, you can connect with various Azure services. And if you remember, in the beginning of today's session, I was telling we are going to discuss whether it is limited only to Azure, or can we connect with other cloud services, or can we connect with on-premise systems. And you have to understand the answer for that question is, by using Azure Data Factory, you can visually, I mean, actually, literally connect with any kind of major source which is accessible through internet, as long as you have a connection that could be established, be it your databases, if it is an AWS service, or if it is some service which is deployed on your on-premise, as long as it is a popular service which falls under this 90 plus connectors, definitely by using Azure Data Factory, you can be able to connect and extract the data. It is doesn't matter whether the source is in Azure ecosystem itself, even if it is outside, even if it is an on-premise, doesn't matter. We can connect and extract data. So as they have clearly mentioned, it is a multi-cloud, also an on-premise hybrid copy platform, right? And as I have just told in the very beginning, they don't clearly will not give you obviously which server is running this ETL, where I mean how much memory it is consuming, that and all is not necessary, because you are using it as a service. So it is basically serverless, and if at all it has to be scaled internally, they will take care of it. You don't need to worry about the load, you don't need to worry about anything. You will be charged ultimately for the number of operations, the range of operations which you are performing. So you don't need to worry about the infrastructure at all, but you need to worry about the number of transactions or the number of operations which you're doing, because it's based on the number of records which is being processed, the amount of data which is being processed, right? So it's a managed service. One doesn't need to worry about how it is installed and where it is running, whether the infrastructure would, what if the server fails and all, you don't need to worry about it because it is completely managed by Azure. And as far as Azure data factory is concerned, this ingest operation, you don't need to sit and write the code for this. Out and out, it is wizard based to connect, right? Next, control flow. So this is where the idea of transformation comes into picture. So what you are going to do and how the data moves from one point to another. In the middle, how are you mapping a source field to a destination field? If at all you are using some filtering option, what filtering conditions you are using, and if at all you are making some validations, what validation you are doing. All these operations can be dealt. Definitely there is a way to do these things in Azure Data Factory, and Azure Data Factory provides a solution for all this. So it offers solution for control flow, and also it offers solution for, it's not about just ingesting the data, infusing the data to some other destination. So it might be for Azure Data Lake, or it might be an Azure SQL database or MySQL database, or it can be some other service where, for example, Cosmo DB service, whatever the destination may be, it lets you move the data from one location to another. So you can actually use wizards as well as design flows, how to make the data flow from one point to another as a continuous, it's not just one source and one destination. As a pipeline you can build it. That is what data flow is all about. And most importantly, when this process needs to happen, so when the data needs to be ingested, when the data needs to be transformed, when the entire pipeline needs to execute, whether it has to be started manually or whether it has to start based on an event, or whether it has to be executed every day or every 5 minutes, that has to be decided, right? So that facility is of course given by Azure Data Factory. You are allowed, or there is a feature to schedule when this entire pipeline which you build needs to execute. It can be manual, or it can be based on events, or it can be scheduled. That's what, right? So according to Azure Data Factory, the feature which lets us do this is, there is a feature called trigger where you can do this. So once you have configured all this stuff, always you can understand, or you can check how many, whether the pipeline has executed successfully, how many records that are processed, and whether the entire pipeline processed properly. If at all there is a failure, where is the failure, and over a period of time how this has been faring. All this monitoring details is a part and parcel of this code-free ETL as a service, which is nothing but Azure Data Factory. So to summarize this particular discussion, that is, what is ETL as a service with respect to Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory, the key functions which it supports is, it provides facility to ingest data. Second, it allows us to, if you have multiple components which are interlinked with each other, it lets us do a proper control flow, as well as it will be able to let us connect one source to one destination, or multiple sources to multiple destination, whatever the kind of combination, whatever the design pattern which you get in. For all that, it provides a way to configure the data flow. And if at all the pipeline is configured, so this data flow configuration is what they usually, I mean, in Azure terminology, and particularly Azure Data Factory terminology, what they do call is a complete orchestration, a data flow orchestration. So if you have orchestrated the data flow, when it has to execute, that can be obviously triggered. So for that also they offer a feature. And finally, the obvious part, you don't need to implement anything. So you can monitor your pipeline by using the monitor feature, right? So a typical real-time implementation. So here I'm just presenting a typical real-time implementation by connecting multiple Azure services, and in the picture you could see where Data Factory comes into picture, right? So this particular picture is not depicting only Data Factory. in a real-time scenario, in a real-time case study, or in a real-time business need, actual business need is, end of the day, a business user or a customer needs to use a service. Maybe they might be using an analytical service, or they might be using a reporting service, or they might be using a transaction service, whatever, right? So end of the day, finally it is consumed at the business layer, where entire thing is processed and made available to the end user in the form of applications or APIs, whatever. And the serving layer, right, which gets this data in the form of visualization. So in Power BI, you can visualize the data in a data layer like Cosmos DB. You can hold data in multiple documentation formats, which your application can read and visualize, right? So how do these guys get the data? So the continuously streamed data, I don't know how many of you have understanding about Apache Spark and all, which are streaming service. What is a streaming service? A continuously received data will be continuously moved to another destination. If at all some intermediate processing is done, it will be done. It will be done at a very large scale, right? So actually, Azure Databricks is a service implemented in Azure by infusing the technology called Apache Spark. So as simple as that, it is an Apache Spark implementation of Azure, and named it as Databricks. And Data Lake is a warehousing service. And as you see, where our thing comes into picture is Data Factory. So in a real business scenario, for application needs, we might be integrating various components. So we might be visualizing the data, we might be storing the consumable data in a NoSQL database. How this NoSQL data gets the data, or how this visualization component Power BI or analysis component called Power BI gets its data is, the data is continuously streamed into these sources. How it is streamed? From a warehousing tool called as, or a storage layer called as a data lake. Azure Data Lake is a layer in Azure which is meant to store large petabytes of data, not even terabytes, petabytes of data in a very, very large scale. It is meant to store the data. So how do we get the store the data into this? In the sense, we might be getting data from various data sources, and we might be extracting, and we might be building a pipeline to store this. So one should not misunderstand, it's always meant for this flow. I'm just, as a real-time scenario, if at all it is used in a very complex big system by integrating multiple Azure components, this is how a real picture of usage would be. So the place where it falls into picture is two other sources. Data Factory as a layer, it is just involved in ingesting the data, right? So it plays always a crucial role between a source and a destination, right? So in this case, it is an intermediary between the source of the data to the Azure Data Lake layer, right? So let us get into the implementation part of it. So what if I develop something by using the service called as Azure Data Lake? What key terms are involved? What key components are involved? What are the terms involved into this service called as Azure Data Factory? So here is what we need to observe these terms very clearly. So far, whatever we have spoken is general terms, but these terms are very specific to this service called as Azure Data Factory. So as you see here, the first term is linked services. So whatever I have presented here, triggers, pipelines, activities, data sets, and linked services. These 5 units, what are this? These are components of Azure Data Lake. So if you, Data Factory. So if you open Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Factory is composed of this primary building units. So inside Azure Data Factory, you will be able to create triggers, you'll be able to create pipelines, you'll be able to create activities, you'll be able to create data sets, you'll be able to create linked services. For example, if you take a database, what you'll be able to create? You'll be able to create tables, you'll be able to create views, you'll be able to create procedures, you'll be able to create triggers, you'll be able to create functions. So these are the components which you create in a database. Likewise, in Azure Data Factory, the building blocks are triggers, pipelines, activities, data sets, and linked services. So I'm going to give you the meaning of each and every component. So these are the components of Azure Data Factory. So the first component is something called as linked services. So first of all, if at all you need to get a data set. Data set, I don't need to even explain you. A data set is nothing but some information. It might be in a text format, or it might be in a JSON format, it might be in a CSV format, or it might be in XML format. Some raw format or a semi-structured format, the data will be there, which is what we call data set, right? So if you need to get the data set, first of all, you need to be able to communicate to something else, right? That something else is nothing but the data sources. So how do you get the information from data sources? So there must be some connection established from your Azure Data Factory to the source, right? So the stored connections or the configured connections are nothing but the linked services. So you have to create a linked service to get connected with source as well as destination. It's not always about source, even with the destination. So with a source, if you want to connect, you need to create a linked service. If with a destination you want to connect, you need to create a linked service. So practically within the next 15 minutes, I'd be showing you how do we create this linked service. Okay. Next, once you have a linked service, next you need to create a data set. That is, if I am configuring, say, Azure Blob Storage or a API, in this API, which endpoint am I consuming and which data I'm extracting? For example, if I am connecting it to an RDBMS system, which table am I extracting? That has to be configured in a data set. So once data set is configured, I told you just before a few minutes, this is the ingest part. So in the ingest part, what actual components are involved? Two components. What are those two components? Linked service and data set. So after ingesting, you need to go for controlling the flow of the data and infusing the transformation part. And data flow is, if at all multiple destinations are there, multiple components are involved in the data flow, how do you configure this? So that would be, no matter how complex it is, right? That would be dealt with the help of a feature called as activity. So when you are working with Azure Data Factory, you need to create linked service, you need to create data sets, and to deal with the control flow and data flow, you need to create activities. And most of this, as I have clearly told, it is code free. For none of this, you need to write code. You just need to drag and drop things, and you need to configure things in a wizard. So if you configure these activities, right, this contribute what? You are actually building a pipeline, because you have defined from which data set you are transforming the data and to which data set you are moving it, and how the logic is interconnected, you are defining it in the activity. So the collaboration of this linked services, data set, and the flow of the data, everything together is nothing but one single logic unit called as pipeline. So you have to come from the beginning. So when I create a pipeline, within a pipeline, what you might be calling is, you might be referring to a linked service, you might be referring to a data set, you might be creating an activity. So once a pipeline is created, it will be staying calm. It will not execute automatically. It is just a configuration. So that configuration needs to be executed. That's what I told, right? So here I told it has to be scheduled, isn't it? So once the pipeline is created, you need to actually say when to execute this pipeline. So for that, you need to configure a trigger. It can be manual, or it can be based on an event, or it can be periodical. You can specify which time it has to execute. So you need to create a trigger. So when you open and create a service called Azure Data Factory, as I have already told, within Azure Data Factory, there is an Azure Data Factory studio, right? In that studio, you can create pipelines, right? So when you create pipelines, there must be a mechanism to interlink things. So to create activities, there must be some mechanisms. Of course it is. But when I create the activities, what are the primary things which are involved? Data sets. So if data sets needs to be there, what is the primary thing that is needed? You need to have some sources or destinations to which you want to connect. That is actually given by using linked services. So this is the overall working mechanism of Azure Data Factory, the components involved in Data Factory. Exactly this trigger, pipeline, activities, data services, sorry, data sets and linked services is what I'm going to explain practically to you in this 2 hours session itself, right? So already I have told this in the other discussion. So the overall process is from a source, extracting the data, by using Azure Data Factory, transforming the data, loading the data to another warehouse, right? And finally, from the warehouse, they might be using applications or business intelligence tool to visualize it. So the area where Azure Data Factory comes into picture is from a source to destination. For transforming the information, Azure Data Factory comes into picture. So let me come to the practical part. So I'm going to practically show you how to implement this. I mean, a practical study, a case study to show you how Azure Data Factory works. So the example which I'm going to show you is I'm going to get data from an semi-structured or unstructured format called CSV. So I'm going to use a CSV document source. So from that source, I'm going to build a pipeline, right? So this pipeline is going to be built in Azure Data Factory. And when I build this pipeline, it will extract the information from here. And I want to infuse that information into a structured data source or a destination. So I'm going to connect to MySQL database, and for MySQL database I haven't used any on-premise database, but even on-premise is possible. I clearly told you can connect with on-premise database as well. So this is what I'm going to practically show you. So here the involved components are CSV file, where I'm going to put the CSV file I'll show you, and MySQL database, how I have configured the MySQL database I'll show you, and how am I going to implement it in the Azure Data Factory from scratch I'll show you. But whereas the CSV file and this MySQL, I do have it configured already, right? So this is the practical demonstration which I'm going to show you, so that whatever we have spoken theoretically until now, we'll see practically, so that we can get an understanding. So before I get into the practical stuff, as I've been telling, the costing part, right from the beginning I've been telling, you are charged for what you use. It's not for the amount of infrastructure that is being used. I haven't told yet about the integration runtime, which once I finish the demo of the hands-on, I'll talk about the integration runtime. So if at all you are using any integration runtime, for that integration runtime, you will be charged for the pipeline, each pipeline activity which you are building. So on per hour basis, it is configured. Sorry, not configured, charged. And you have plans as well. So you can get the information. Once you get the service, you will obviously understand what things are you using. So we have to ascertain the cost according to the service which you are building, and you need to know the range of activities, the number of operations that are happening. So based on that, you'll be charged. So it is service based costing, right? So as Azure claims, pay for what you do with the system, so or what you use. So let me practically get into this stuff. So I have my Azure account. As I told, the components involved are a CSV file, isn't it? So where have I created the CSV file is, you know, I'm not sure how many of you have extensively worked with Azure. So in Azure, there is a service called as Azure Blob Storage. So to work with Azure Blob Storage, you need to create a storage account. Until this part, we haven't brought the so-called Azure Data Factory into picture. I'm talking about the source. My source is in Azure itself. So you have to understand, I have a storage account in Azure and I created a storage account called Store Factory. So in that Store Factory, I can store what? I can store queue messages, I can store tables, I can store files which can be linked with my desktop machine, or I can store binary data, right? So if I want to store binary data in the sense raw files, right, or files. So generally you need to create a container. So I have created a container, and I do have a folder called CSVs, that is container called CSVs. In that container, I do have a file called as cars.csv. So as simple as that. And this cars.csv, it is available online. So generally for most examples, you look for a data set. It's a very popularly used data set. I'm getting the same data set here, cars.csv, which contains some cars information and which is in the CSV format, right? So I already have a data source. According to this use case scenario, the data is in Azure itself and it is available in the form of a CSV file, and in which service it is there is Azure Storage Service. Okay, so this is the source, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to configure this source step by step. Second, okay, I need a database to move the data, right? For that also, I didn't go for any on-premise database. But if you ask me, can we use any on-premise database? Yes, we can use on-premise database. So I created, and there is another service called as Azure Database for MySQL Service. So here, if you click create, you'll be able to configure a database server, and you can specify the various service details, and you can specify the username, password, and you can specify the compute and storage. So based on the compute and storage which you choose, you'll be charged obviously. So you can reduce the size according to the scenario, and you'll be getting the estimated cost. So finally, after you validate, you'll be able to create the service. So I did that already. I created a MySQL service, and I edited the connection security and all. As of now, I made it accessible everywhere. I mean, from any IP address, I can access this database, provided I need to give the username, password, of course, but I made it accessible from every system possible in the world because I use the IP 0.0.0.0. As long as you can have username and password, you can interact with it. Because for this demonstration, to make things easier, I just made it public. And so to connect with the database, Azure itself will give you the connection details. So this is the host name of the data source, okay, and username is this one, password I'll give, okay. So this is what the connection details. So what is the scenario I have defined? The scenario I have defined is unstructured CSV data or a CSV data. I want to create Azure Data Factory account, and in that Azure Data Factory, I want to build a pipeline. In that pipeline, I want to do a transforming operation, that is mapping operation. Look at this. The ID from this CSV is getting mapped to ID. They have provided one column. But if there are 7 or 8 columns, we need to do mapping for all this, and then we need to transform it and move it to the SQL format. This is a very entry level. Any class, if at all we are taking a course on it, maybe the first example would be this, right? So at that level, I'm explaining it. But if we take a comprehensive course, we need to explore various case studies. So this is as simple as that. I'm doing a very simple case study here, right? So now, until now, whatever I have shown is I have configured this SQL database already. I have placed this CSV file. It's already residing in some storage, isn't it? So let me try to connect with the remote database. Look at this. I did connect to it already. So whatever the source I have shown you. So this is the host name. This is the username, and I give the password, and I'm able to enter into the database. So let me show databases. And I did create a database called factory, right? So let me use the database called factory, show tables. I created a table called cars. Why did I create a table called cars is, one second. As you see in the Excel sheet, it's a CSV file, of course. If I show like this, it will be like this. Maybe there are chances one can get confused. Let me open it in the notepad. Because it's not an Excel file, it's a CSV file. The natural format is very important. All the Excel files, sorry, all the CSV files might not be sometimes using the same delimiter. So delimiter can be even a semicolon also, or you can be using other delimiters also. But natural delimiter is comma. And in all CSVs, first row might not be always dedicated for storing the column name. But in the CSV, the first row is meant for storing the column name. From second row onwards, what we do have is some set of records, right? So according to this, make, model, type, origin, drivetrain, and length, all of this are fields, except length, all of them are string fields. So one, for example, from a source to destination, if you're doing something, if you're automating something, there must be some possibility for mapping. So you need to create things according to possibility. So I created a table called cars. I did create the fields exactly mapping the or matching the CSV file, right? So here I have 6 fields which is matching my CSV file, and if you check the data, as of now there is no data, right? It's an empty set, no data yet, but it doesn't matter the size. Make sure that somehow it is able to accommodate the data. So I made sure that it accommodates the data. I created the table. So we have source ready and destination ready. It's time for us to work with Azure Data Factory. Okay. So search Azure Data Factory. So there is this option called as data factories. So I do have a data factory already to make sure if at all something goes wrong in the last moment, instead of taking it out, I can immediately show the working mechanism. But as of now, I just want to give the detailing properly. So I'm creating a data factory. It might not take much time. You also need to know what are the things involved, right? So what did I do? Once again, I repeat. I did create a data factory. I click the create button. I do have a subscription. And look at this. At this point, they are not mentioning anything regarding pricing, because pricing is entirely depends upon what pipeline you build. As a service, for some services, for during the service creation itself, pricing details and other stuff can be decided. Whereas in this case, even case of MySQL, it is showing up the estimated cost, because I was telling what CPU I need, how many CPUs I need, what memory I need, so they can estimate the cost, because it's an infrastructure as a service. Whereas here, we are not specifying anything about the infrastructure, right? So let me create, I have a resource group already in Azure. For everything you need to give a resource group. Every resource falls under the resource group, and I'm going to put it under East US. I gave the name for the factory. I called it my factory 45. There are two versions again. The older version V1, it is going to be deprecated. The recent version, okay. So I'm going to use V2. If at all, in the future, if you want to write some code associated with the pipelines which you build, if some code has to be executed or if some script has to be executed, where would your pipeline pick up the code, right? So there must be some place where you need to store the code, right? So you need to configure your code repositories. It might be either stored in Azure repo or it might be in GitHub. If you don't have anything or no such ideas as of now, you can simply ignore it. Configure Git later. As of now, I don't have any code involved, zero code. Right? So if you ignore it here, it's not that you cannot configure any further. Later also you can configure it. I'll show you how to do it. Next, regarding networking, you can programmatically access this data factory service, right? If at all you are writing code, so whether you want to access it in a private network or whether you want to access a public endpoint, that's up to you. I'm making it as a public endpoint. And regarding encryption, I'm not changing anything. And finally, I'm creating the data factory. So the validation is passed. Let us create the service. So meanwhile it creates, I just want to reiterate the point that what we are going to see, what is a linked service, what is a data set, how to create activities, pipelines, triggers. These are the key terms, and within a pipeline you can define activities. Within an activity you can specify data flow and other various key components. So practically we are going to see how these are arranged in a data factory service. Okay, so that is going to be the flow. Okay, so let me get into this. The deployment is complete. So that's it. So if you see the factory, this is the factory. At any point if you want to come into it, just open portal.azure.com. You can click data factories and directly you will find your factory name. You can go here. Always it will show up this screen. Okay, so the overview, you'll be finding the resource group name and other things, and you'll always find the monitoring aspect. I told you that you'll be able to find the details of various things. How many times your pipeline has run, how many times your activities within a pipeline, there can be multiple activities. Okay, so how many times activity has run, so the CPU utilization, memory utilization, all this stuff, right? And how many times you have the configure trigger is running, all this monitoring details can be found out, right? So apart from that, these are pretty much very common in all the most options like properties, networking options, just very common in all Azure services. So without spending much time on this, what did I do? I clicked open Azure Data Factory Studio. So it is opening it in the next window. So as you see, exactly, it is giving options like ingest. No matter whatever you click, it is almost going to lead into the same screen. Ingest, orchestrate, transform data, configure, SISs. I mean, if you from your cloud, if you want to connect with some other on-premise system, SQL Server Integration Service, which we call SSIS. So you can configure integration services here in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new pipeline. Okay. So I repeat, what did I do? I came to the home. So the current data factory which I'm working is my factory. In this, I'm creating a new pipeline. Okay. Exactly whatever we have discussed in the theory. So we don't have anything yet, no pipeline. So I'm going to create a new pipeline. So when I create a pipeline, immediately what it is showing up is the default name for the pipeline is it is calling pipeline 1, and you do find within a pipeline there is activities, not activity, not singular, plural. There can be multiple activities happening, and you can configure multiple data flows, right? It can be as complex as it can go, right? So no matter how complex your business scenario is, you can address the solution. But as of now, what I'm doing is I'm just renaming the pipeline. I'm calling CSV. I call it CSV MySQL pipeline. So until you publish it, until your activity is published, you could see there might be a dot symbol. That means things are not finalized yet, not published yet. So finally, after doing everything, you need to publish it. Okay. So as of now, we just created a pipeline. Is that fine? Only is that sufficient? So what we need to do is we need to think about how to do things, right? So I clearly told you that in the theoretical discussion, if at all you want to build a pipeline, pipeline contains activity. As you see there is a thing called activities. But if at all I have to work with activities, what is involved? Data sets is involved. And if at all data sets is involved, first of all, what I need to have is linked services, isn't it? So what I need to do is, I don't find any option here called as linked services, right? But there is this option called as manage. So you need to click this manage, and under manage you have options for, I told you, right, even though you're not configuring your source code, if at all you have any code to run, later also you can do it. So you can configure your repositories at any point you want, right? And triggers also could be configured here. So you can create a new trigger, right? So it can be a scheduled trigger also. Look at this, there are various types. If it is I told you, right, a trigger can be based on a event, or it can be a schedule. There are many options. So you can create a trigger as per your requirement. And apart from that, security configurations can be also made, right? So if at all someone wants to connect with this data factory and access the things, and if some other data factory wants to connect with this data factory, how it can connect, all this security configuration can be done here. The focus right now is I'm going to create a linked service. Okay. So let me create a linked service. So look at this. That's what I told. It supports 90 plus connectors. That's what we have seen, right? So look at the amount of options do we have. In Azure itself, it is letting us connect with many things. In database, it is letting us connect with anything. With files, it lets us do. Protocols also, it lets us use protocol based connections. And definitely I think yeah, Amazon services also you can get connect. There are many third-party services here, right? SAP, Salesforce, so Zoho, send a preview. So many third-party service it is able to offer the service for connections. Cassandra for NoSQL cases, Cassandra, MongoDB. It can be even on-premise, right? So that's solution for most of the things. So our primary focus right now is, I told you my source is in the blob storage, right? So I'm clicking blob storage, which is in Azure itself. So let me continue. So as I told, first of all, you need to say where your source is, right? So let me call the linked service as CSV source, okay? And if at all that service is, if we have configured security and other stuff, I can use other options like service principal, managed identity. So to elaborate all this stuff, first of all, we need to know how security internally works on Azure. So the security principles which we follow in Azure is pretty much same for all the services. As of now, I'm just trying to use the account key, that is the current account. As long as you are in the same account, you'll be able to access the service. So I used account key. I'm trying to specify my subscription with which I have logged in. I mean, in my account, I have only one subscription, that is this one. I showed you, right? So even before starting this example, I have shown you clearly that I have a storage account. The name of the account is stored factory. And since I do have only one blob storage now, only that is being listed. So I have identified it. Test connection. So let us check. We are not identifying a particular file here. So we are identifying this and the connection is successful. So the linked service is created for one. Okay. CSV source is configured. Step 1. So I repeat, what did I do? Under manage services, I came into linked services and I clicked new and I did CSV configuration, right? So next I click once more, and if I search MySQL, I do find two kinds of possibilities. This is if at all your machine is on premise, and if at all it is accessible over a public network, and if at all you do have right credentials, you can even connect with MySQL, which is residing even in AWS or any kind of other service. In our case, my MySQL database is in the Azure itself. So it is Azure database for MySQL. I'm selecting this unit. Let me continue. Integration runtime. I didn't, even that case, I didn't specify integration runtime. So by default, Azure Data Factory is resolving the integration system according to our configuration. But instead of using this, you can create your own integration systems, right? So that maybe you can identify 5 or 6 different components together and you can make an integration system. So if you connect to that integration system, you can connect with multiple sources. So there is an option for even creating integration runtimes by your own. But by default, it is auto resolved based on your configuration, right? So if we do a proper comprehensive course on Azure Data Factory, there will be a dedicated session on integration runtimes, how to create them and how to utilize them as well, right? So by default, it is getting auto resolved. So I'm choosing the subscription and I need to specify the server name. Since it is part of Azure itself, this is what auto resolving is all about. It is able to get things by its own based on, because subscription ID we are giving, and from the database it's choosing the, showing all the databases that are available. So our database, I have shown you that I'm using a database called factory, just shown you, right? So show databases, I do have many database in that factory. Okay, In that only there is a table called cars. Here I will not be specifying the table name and all. Okay. So username is MySQL admin @ this one. So you also need to specify the server name here. In usual MySQL it's not necessary, but in case of Azure you need to. And let me enter the password. Apart from that, no other settings. Let us test the connection. Brilliant. The connection is successful. So even the second linked service is created. So what did we do now? So whatever we have discussed, this part, linked services part, we have wrapped up. Already we have created a pipeline, but we are yet to integrate all of them together, right? So let me go to the next step. Okay. So these are the various management services that are available in the Azure Data Factory: linked service, integration runtimes. Auto resolving integration runtime is the only one which is available. If you want to add things, there are two kinds of integration runtimes which you can do: Azure based integration service, Azure SSIS integration service. So you can configure that. And apart from that, Git configuration. And for any Azure resource, if at all you want to set the things based on some JSON structure without you using the wizard, if you want to directly create, you can have a template of creation of resources. So triggers, parameters, all this, but our workspace is this, isn't it? So let me go for the pipeline once again. So we already created a pipeline, but in that pipeline we are yet to do activities. So before we do activities, the next stop is data set. We don't have data set yet, right? So let me create a new data set. What did I do? Under data set, I clicked the button. I'm trying to create a new data set, and here again I'm going to do CSV. Instead of, if I search CSV directly, it's not showing up, but I need to say where it is. Okay, if I say file, my CSV could be in Amazon F3 or sorry, S3. It can be FTP, or it can be an FTP server or Oracle's cloud storage. So various sources are there, but this guy hasn't shown their own storage called Azure storage service. So let me put blob storage. Here in all, yeah, Azure blob storage. Continue. The case is CSV, right? So let me select CSV. Look at the other formats, the various other formats which are supported. Let me call it CSV cars. But remember, if you want to create a data set, first of all, there must be connection ready, which is nothing but your linked service. So already we created the linked service. So exactly, even though we have two linked services, it is not showing everything. It is intelligent enough. Whatever matches the current context, only that it will show. If at all you are not looking at this, you can create here in the spot. Okay, but we have configured the source already. So let me choose that one. And if you could manually type it, you can, but let me choose it to a wizard. So it connected with the blob storage, isn't it? So it is able to pick the CSVs folder. In that, the file name is cars.csv. We are opening it. If at all before, maybe you have worked with Power BI, or if you have worked with a tool like Talent or Informatica, any ETL service, if you have used, you might be exactly identifying similar kind of functions. Maybe the UI might be changing, the terms might be changing, but no matter what ETL system which you are using, the operations usually remains almost same thing. So here we are already identified this. Done. All right. So one part is done. Let me go for the another data set. So this time it's MySQL, isn't it? So same Azure My database for MySQL. So let me call it car tab linked services Azure MySQL 1. Let us import, and I should not forget, why do we come here? Mainly to select the table. So there is only one table there. Cars table is selected. Okay. Let us click OK. So even this one is done. So at any point you can delete it or edit it, whatever you can want to do. You can. We have two data sets. Now it's time for us to get into the activities. So if you want to get into activities at any point of time, click the pipeline. Okay. So what you need to do is, in the theory I have told that you can specify various components. When you build a data flow, you can drag and drop various components like code, or you can put whatever the components which you have built, you can put it. So there are various integration components here. You can add store procedure, you can add validation, right? You can add the lookup service, aggregators, whatever you want, you can add it. But as of now, the service or the connector which I'm going to use is copy data, right? So like this, each of this function has its own meaning. Okay. So based on the property what you drag and drop, for copy data property, it has its own settings, right? So anything you drag and drop, according to that you'll get the settings. So if at all you're dragging and dropping Azure function, based on Azure function, you'll be having an appropriate setting that has to be given. Where is the service and where the function is all in. But as of now, I'm using this copy data. Let me name it. Let me call it copy CSV. Look at this three important operations. So for a copy data control, it's a straightforward control. So we have to specify where is the source, where is the sink, and what is the mapping, right? Intermediate processing is not there. So let me specify the source is CSV. No. So before I select this, let me go and check the CSV cars data set. In the data set, I need to double check the settings. What is the row delimiter, new line character, and what is the column delimiter, comma, right? And other settings you need to cross check it. And I need to check this, very important, first row as header, because in my CSV first row is a header, otherwise you will get a problem. Okay. So now let me get back to the pipeline and let me get to the CS source and let me preview the data. Okay. So clearly it is showing up the CSV data. Obviously the first row is taken as the header. So one part is configured. Okay. So let me configure the sync as well. So sync is car tab. Okay. So it will not show the destination because for this it has to run. By default, you cannot preview it, isn't it? Okay. But you have to go to the mapping. Let us import schemas for both the cases. As you see from the source in the CSV file, make is getting mapped to make, model is getting mapped to model, type is getting mapped to this, length is getting mapped to this. So the mapping is already correct. I don't need to explicitly change anything, right? So all I need to do is publish it. Okay. So in the pipeline called CSV MySQL pipeline, what we have configured is two data sets, CSV cars and cart tab. And after creating this, all we are doing is publishing it. So the publishing is succeeded in the sense everything is okay. And if you want to create a trigger, you can, but if you want to manually trigger it, I'm not going to trigger based on a schedule or something. I want to manually trigger it and check it because it's a one-time activity. This is not a continuous pipeline. There are continuous pipelines which you can build. So scenario to scenario, it varies. So I want to reiterate the point is right from the beginning, I've been telling you very, very clearly, I'm doing the simplest of the simplest thing that is possible with Azure Data Factory so that you should not, one should not miss judge the capabilities of the system. It is capable of handling complex of the complex scenarios because it is capable of integrating any major source under the earth, right? As I have already shown you, it is able to connect with Oracle, SAP, AWS services, Azure services, on-premise service. So maybe for real-time use cases, the complexity involved will be large, right? We have to understand that. So let me trigger it. It's running. Let me go to the home. So it says succeeded. View pipeline run. So the pipeline is executed once and just succeeded. At any point, you can check the number of runs of the pipeline. If at all you want to rerun it, if I rerun it, maybe it might be failing because of the primary key aspect. So what it has run, what activity it has run is copy data, it is succeeded. Trigger runs. So this is what I told about the monitoring aspect of it. You will be able to check everything that has run. The auto resolving integration runtime is the one which came into picture. But how can we know that it has executed successfully? So earlier when I tried to read the data select star from cars, it was an empty set. But right now if I go and select it, if things went fine, yes, it has went fine. The data from the CSV file which was there in the Azure storage account has been retrieved by using the first connector, and it's been processed and mapped, and finally it is moving into the sync and you're able to find this. So My intention here is just to push you into this world called Azure Data Factory and just showing you the capabilities of this system and giving an insight about this terms called linked services, which we have configured. While in theory, maybe it might have quite abstract, but practically we have implemented all these 5 things. So we have seen what is a linked service, what is data set, what is activity. But the key thing is, if at all we put our effort in learning this technology, the amount of time, the huge amount of time which one needs to invest is our skill with Azure Data Factory is how well you are able to configure the activities and how many controls which you are able to learn and how many controls, because it's not about only copy data. Copy data is just one control in Azure Data Factory. There are many controls which I have shown you. Each control has its own features and every control will have uh, its own possibilities. For example, in copy data, a source is possible, a sink is possible. Whereas in case of some things, multiple sources may be possible, one single destination might be possible. In some cases, source only possible, destination might not be possible. So it depends upon what component you are using in the activity. Copy data is only one component which you have used, right? But in real time, the learning is all about, because I just want to tell you every possibility, right? So there are many other things which you have to learn if we get into this technology, right? As you see, there are various forms of components related to machine learning, general components, executing an already existing pipeline. So each item which you find here will have its own settings, right? So if I push the execute pipeline thing under settings, you'll be able to select a pipeline, right? So for each thing you drag and drop, it has a different setting. So it's learning, this tool is all about understanding each and every property here. So just to conclude what we have done and how these things are integrated with each other, exactly to reiterate, first of all, to create a linked service, you need to have, this is the complete ecosystem of it, nothing beyond this. Any kind of use case you do, these are the 5 different things which are involved in an Azure Data Factory. And we have used all of this. Of course, I haven't created anything by my own. The integration runtime already was there, right? So we have to have an integration runtime. If at all you want to configure a runtime by your own, you can configure by putting various other connections into it. So from an integration runtime, we can create a linked service. So once you have a linked service, you can create a data set out of it. So once you have a data set, you can build an activity. In an activity, you might be using various properties to build the pipeline. So the pipeline logic will contain activity. Activity might be using data set. Data set in turn will be using linked service to get the data. So this is how the various components which you have used are interlinked with each other, right? So to conclusively tell you, this integration runtime, right? Generally, if at all you want to connect with your on-premise resources, maybe you have to configure your own integration service by using this SQL server integration service. After you create an integration service, you can attach it with Azure Data Factory so that you can merge your on-premise service with your Azure cloud. So as far as the capabilities are concerned, anything you imagine in terms of integration and building data pipelines, you can achieve it with the help of Data Factory. And as far as commercial aspect is concerned, you are absolutely going to be charged, not for the kind of resources involved. It is absolutely for the amount of, if you configure an integration service, for that integration service, you're going to be charged. I have already shown you. And if at all you're running a pipeline, for running that pipeline, you're going to be charged. So this is what this service is all about. And whatever the time we had, in that time, I just try to put forward with a very simple example. I try to give an insight about what could be an activity, what could be a data set, what could be a linked service, what could be an integration runtime, and what could be pipeline. So if we know this base terms, we can do anything with Azure Data Factory. But to build that, the key aspect is understanding the activity building better, so that we have to invest our time in learning various controls over there. So that's it about the tool. So that's what my agenda all about. Whatever I intend to demonstrate in the very beginning of the session, I told that I want to tell you what is possible with the system and how to interact with the system, what are the components of the system. And I told you I'd be demonstrating a simple demonstration by putting everything into picture.